Hello viewers, today we have a long-awaited, brief but very important video, and today we'll be ranking every single generation of Toyota Camry from an Australian perspective. I know the Camry was a little bit different in overseas markets, but we'll be looking at the Camrys as it was sold here in Australia. Starting off with the Genesis, the original V10 Camry. Now this came with the 1S engine. It was all right, but it's the start of the Camry. Things weren't quite there yet with this one. Also, I've just chosen the sedan variants of all of these for the photos because that was a one common trip between all of these Camrys. They all came in the sedan option, but we will be discussing other body shapes that were available with each generation. So here with the original V10, we were given the option of a sedan or a liftback. A liftback does look pretty cool, but these are early 80s cars that were sort of designed in the late 70s. They're not quite modern enough for modern use, in my opinion. Then we go to the V20. Here we have the option of a sedan or a wagon, and the V20 wagons are probably some of the best looking wagons you'll see on the roads. They had the option of a 3S engine, and I'm not sure if they were sold in Australia, but I know overseas you did get the option of a 3S GE as well as the 2VZ V6. Again, these are theoretical. I've never actually seen a V6 version of the V20 Camry in Australia, but there's probably some level of them out there. But yeah, now we're getting into something a bit more modern. The V20 is pretty good, but as we all know, peak Camry has to be the XV10, the first generation wide body Camry. This is peak automotive perfection. You cannot have a car more perfect than an XV10 V6 manual wagon. That is my ultimate unicorn dream car. I've seen photos on the internet of a factory manual XV10 V6 manual wagon. That was in Europe. I haven't seen one in Australia, unfortunately, but if one does come up for sale, please let me know because I've been looking for years for the unicorn XV10 V6 manual wagon. I have driven the V6 manual sedan, and these things are fast. Like, it is actually mind-boggling how fast the V6 manual versions of these Camrys are. I grew up in the back of a 93 automatic 4-cylinder sedan, unfortunately. And the 4 cylinders also do have something to be said for themselves. They're really not that fast, but they are absolutely bulletproof. The 5S FE in the XV10 Camry is arguably in the top 5 most reliable engines ever created of all time. These things will leak like a burst fire hydrant, but they will keep running. You can run it with no oil, you can run it with no coolant, and they just will not die. They refuse to die. You cannot destroy a 5S FE engine. Next, we have the XV20, the second generation wide body. This one's a little bit tough to put between the B and C tier. The 4-cylinder option was still the 5S FE, but the build quality was not quite as good as the original wide body, the XV10. I'm going to put it in C tier, and for the V6, they switched from the 3VZ to the 1MZ. And this is where we're going from an iron block to an aluminium block engine. And we know that the 1MZ does start to have a bit of oil consumption issues, so on and so forth. But at least you did get the option of a sedan or a wagon in this. Actually, I'm going to bump it up a tier at the bottom of B tier, only because you could still get a wagon version of the XV20 Camry. Unfortunately, this is the last generation of Camry where a wagon is available. Next, we have the XV30 Camry. This one's a little bit tricky, whether we want to put it in A or B tier. There are lots of good things and lots of bad things about this Camry. I think this is arguably the best looking Camry ever made, but you never got a wagon variant. This was the first time you only had a sedan to choose from. The Sportivo with the Sportivo headlights looks fantastic, but you also switched from the 5S FE to the, I think it was the 2AR or 1AR. It was one of the it was one of the AZ engines that they switched to on this generation of Camry for the 4-cylinder. They're a lot more powerful, they're a lot faster than the old 5S FE, but it's also aluminium block, and this is when you had these early aluminium block engines. As they get older, if they're not perfectly serviced on time, they'll start to have oil consumption issues, which was just not an issue with the older Camrys. Mostly because even though if they leaked oil, they just didn't care. They just ran anyway. But yeah, this one's tricky, whether I want to put it in A or B tier, but I'll put it at the bottom of A tier. Because they are fast, and if you get a Sportivo V6 manual one of these, that is a pretty good choice. Arguably, if you wanted a sedan to daily drive, they're not quite as reliable as the XV10s, but they're still pretty good. And it's probably, if you wanted a sedan, the best Camry. But of course, if you want a wagon, you got to get the XV10 V6 manual. Then we get to the XV40. Now this is a start of a dark era in the Camry. This is the first time we got a hybrid Camry, and it was also the last time that we got the option of a manual gearbox. They're decent cars, they're nice and roomy inside, but this was the start of a dark era, and for that reason I'm going to have to put it in C tier, and we have to put the next generation in D tier. Now the XV50, that was the last time the Camry was manufactured in Australia, and at this point most of the Camrys were in hybrid taxis. And yeah, with the XV50, like, they're decent cars, but they just have no driving dynamic to them at all. And yeah, they're just not built as well as they used to be in the 90s. So look, all Camrys are good cars, but in Camry rankings, this has to go in D tier. Then we get to the XV70. There was no XV60 Camry. And this is the first time the Camrys were all imported into Australia because Toyota shut down their Altona plant. And I've driven this generation. They're decent. They drive really nice. They're very long, actually, this generation of Camry. But yeah, it just feels like every other Toyota hybrid. Incredibly efficient, pretty well built, but it just feels like a robot. It feels like an appliance. It just doesn't have anything unique to it. So yeah, for that reason, I'm going to have to put this in C tier. Lastly, we come to the latest generation of Camry that we have right now. The looks are polarizing. Now, my company car actually drive the RAV4 of the same generation, so it's got the same powertrain, I'm pretty sure, and it's got a similar look. And look, I'll put it in B tier. The looks are growing on me, but again, it's a hybrid appliance. But at this point, we've kind of accepted our fate with hybrids. It started off with this generation, but at this point, it's one of the few like actual sedans that you can still buy on the market, and without having to resort to an SUV, which of course no one should ever buy an SUV for any reason ever. So for that reason, because it is one of the few sedans you can still buy, I'll have to give it B tier. So yeah, of course there can only be one S tier, and as we all know, the ultimate family car that cannot be beaten is the Unicorn XV10 V6 manual wagon. Thanks for watching.